Ever get that feeling? No, like you're constantly running out of time. But no matter how much you try to squeeze it all in, work, family, maybe even a little self-care if you're lucky, there's never enough. It's kind of a universal struggle, right? This feeling of being overwhelmed, of always playing catch up with the clock. Like just the other day, I was trying to get my kids ready for school pack lunches. Find that missing shoe, always missing shoe, while simultaneously trying to answer work emails, and you guess it squeeze in a quick meditation session. And I gotta keep those stress levels down, right? But you just hit me, this whole idea that we can somehow do it all is kind of a myth. So today we're diving into a book that really challenges that myth, 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. And the title itself is kind of a punch in the gut, isn't it? 4,000 weeks, that's it. That's the average human lifespan. It's funny, Brookman talks about how when he'd ask people to guess the average lifespan in weeks, they'd throw out these huge numbers way off the mark. It really highlights how we tend to have this distorted view of time, like we have way more of it than we actually do. And you know what? Before clocks and schedules ruled our lives, people experienced time in a completely different way. Imagine like a medieval farmer. Their days were dictated by the rhythms of nature. Sunrise, sunset, the changing seasons. There's no pressure to get everything done because, well, a farmer's work isn't really done, is it? It's an ongoing cycle, a constant flow of tasks dictated by the natural world. This way of experiencing time is kind of like being in a state of deep time, where time feels more cyclical, more fluid, less linear and rigid. And, I think we can still tap into that feeling sometimes, even in our modern, hyper-scheduled world. Like when you're totally engrossed in a hobby you love, or lost in a good book, or having a deep conversation with a friend, it's like time just melts away. But then came the invention of the clock and everything changed. Suddenly, time wasn't just this natural flow, it became a commodity, something to be measured, managed, maximized. And that's when this whole anxiety around time, this feeling of never having enough, really started to take hold. I remember when I first got into all those productivity hacks and time management techniques, I was like obsessed with to-do lists, time tracking apps, you name it. I thought if I could just optimize my schedule, I could finally get on top of everything and achieve that elusive work-life balance. But here's the thing. It's kind of like a hamster wheel, isn't it? You get more efficient, you check more things off your list, but the demands just keep coming. It's like Parkinson's law in action work expands to fill the time available for its completion. And it's even more frustrating. Even if we somehow manage to cram it all in the goalpost, just keep moving. Finish that big project at work. Great, here's a new one. Finally achieve that semblance of work-life balance. Also, now you're supposed to be training for a marathon, learning Mandarin, and volunteering at the animal shelter. So maybe, just maybe, the problem isn't that we're not doing enough, but that we're trying to do too much. Maybe the key to a less stressful, more fulfilling life isn't about squeezing more in, but about being more intentional about what we choose to let in. And that brings us to one of the biggest myths of productivity, this idea that we can somehow magically make time for everything that's important. You know, that classic rocks in a jar analogy? Big rocks for the important tasks, pebbles for the smaller stuff, sand for all the little things. The idea is, if you put the big rocks in first, everything else will fit nicely around them. Sounds great in theory, right? But here's the problem. In real life, our jars are overflowing with big rocks. There are just too many things that seem important, too many demands on our time and attention. I mean, think about your own life for a second. How many things are on your to-do list right now that feel absolutely essential? I bet it's a lot. And that's the trap of productivity culture, isn't it? It makes us believe that we should be able to do it all, have it all, be it all. But maybe instead of trying to fit it all in, we need to get better at choosing which rocks to leave out. Maybe the real key to productivity isn't about doing more, but about doing less and doing it better. One strategy that really resonates with me is this idea of paying yourself first with time. It's like more personal finance, right? You know, as you pay yourself first by setting aside money for savings before you even think about spending. Well, the same goes for time. If something is truly important to you, whether it's spending time with your family, pursuing a creative passion, or simply taking care of your own well-being, you need to make it a priority, not something you squeeze in if there's time left over. I used to struggle with this so much, I felt guilty about taking time for myself when there was work to be done, emails to answer, errands to run. But then I realized, if I don't make time for the things that truly matter to me, who will? So I started actually blocking out time in my schedule for those things, time for reading, for writing, for just going for a walk in nature without my phone. And you know what? It's made a world of difference. Not only do I feel less stressed and more fulfilled, but I'm actually more productive in the long run. Because when we give ourselves permission to rest, to recharge, to do the things that bring us joy and energy, we come back to our work with more focus, more creativity, and more enthusiasm. But here's another thing that gets in the way of us using our time wisely: procrastination. We all do it right. But have you ever stopped to think about why we procrastinate? Often it's because we're afraid of failing. I'm afraid of not being good enough, afraid of making the wrong choice. Like, I'm a writer, and I used to put off working on my novel for months because I was terrified of it being bad. I mean, what if I poured my heart and soul into this project and it turned out to be a total flop? So I did what any self-respecting procrastinator would do. I cleaned my entire apartment, organized my sock drawer, and binge-watched an entire season of a show I didn't even like. Anything to avoid facing that fear. And it turns out I'm not alone. Even famous writers like Franz Kafka struggled with procrastination. He had this long, complicated relationship with a woman named Felice Bauer, and he was constantly putting off making any kind of decision about their future together. He was so afraid of committing to one path and closing up other possibilities that he ended up stuck in this state of perpetual uncertainty. And honestly, I think we can all relate to that feeling, can't we? The fear of missing out, of making the wrong choice, of closing one door and not being able to open another. It's like we want to keep all our options open, even if it means never fully committing to anything. But here's the thing: choosing one path inevitably means letting go of others. That's just the nature of a finite life. We can't do it all, experience it all, have it all. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the key is to make peace with loss, to accept that every choice involves sacrifice, and to move forward with intention and courage, knowing that we can't control every outcome. And that brings us to the liberating power of accepting limitations. When we stop fighting against the reality of our finite time, we can actually start making more conscious, intentional choices about how we spend it. Instead of clinging to the illusion of infinite possibilities, we could focus on what truly matters in the here and now. Which, by the way, is a lot harder than it sounds, right? I mean, how often do we actually manage to stay present in the moment without our minds racing ahead to the future or dwelling on the past? It's like, even when we're doing something enjoyable, we often find ourselves thinking, okay, but what's next? It's like we have to be doing, achieving, planning. And you know what? This tendency to view everything through the lens of future outcomes, it can even seep into our leisure time. Like the other day, I was supposed to be relaxing on a beach vacation, right? But instead of just enjoying the sand between my toes and the sound of the waves, I found myself making a mental list of all the must-see sites, the best restaurants, the perfect itinerary. It was like even in my downtime, I felt this pressure to be productive, to make every moment count. This pressure to be productive even in our leisure time is something that the Take Back Your Time movement is pushing back against. They argue that we need to reclaim leisure as something valuable in its own right, not just as a means to an end. And honestly, I think they have a point. Historically, leisure was seen as the default state with work as an interruption. Think about like pre-industrial societies. They had tons of holidays, festivals, communal gatherings. Work was something you did out of necessity, but leisure was where you truly lived. But then came the Industrial Revolution and everything shifted. Suddenly, work became the central focus of life, with the leisure relegated to the sidelines. And somewhere along the way, we forgot how to simply be. I mean, think about it. How often do you truly allow yourself to just relax, to do something purely for the enjoyment of it, without any agenda or goal in mind? It's like we've become so conditioned to view everything through the lens of productivity that we've forgotten how to simply enjoy the experience itself. But here's the thing. Rest isn't just about recharging our batteries so we can work harder. It's about nourishing our souls, connecting with ourselves and others, and experiencing the simple joys of being alive. And you know what? It turns out there are actual scientific benefits to synchronized rest. There was this fascinating study on Swedish vacation habits that showed that people were happier when more people were on vacation at the same time. So when everyone's taking a break, it creates this collective sense of calm, this permission to truly relax and disconnect. Think about it. Doesn't it feel more relaxing to take a vacation when you know your colleagues are also taking a break? You don't have to worry about checking emails, catching up on work, or feeling guilty about being away from the office. On the flip side, when you're the only one taking time off, it can feel more stressful than staying at work. You're constantly checking in, making sure things are running smoothly, and worrying about what you're missing. So maybe, just maybe, the key to a more fulfilling life is to find ways to synchronize our rest, to create pockets of collective downtime where we can truly disconnect and recharge. I know what you're thinking. Easier said than done in our always-on, hyper-connected world, right? And yeah, I get it. It's tough to resist the pull of technology, the constant stream of information, the pressure to be available 24/7. But here's the thing. We have more control over our time than we often realize. We can choose to set boundaries, to disconnect from technology, to create space for rest and rejuvenation. It's not about becoming hermits or Luddites. It's about finding a balance, a way to integrate technology into our lives in a way that serves us, not the other way around. And sometimes the most productive thing we can do is to simply stop doing. It's like when we give ourselves permission to rest or recharge, to simply be, formative. We often come back to our work with more energy, focus, and creativity. It's like that saying, sometimes you need to slow down to speed up. And this brings us to the power of patience, something that's become increasingly rare in our instant gratification culture. We want everything now. Fast food, fast internet, fast results. But some things just can't be rushed, And you know what? That's okay. In fact, sometimes the most rewarding things in life are those that require patience, persistence, and a willingness to embrace the slow, messy process of growth and discovery. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how, the more you try to force something, the more it resists? It's like when we try to control every aspect of our lives to make everything happen on our own timeline, we end up feeling more stressed, more anxious, and less fulfilled. But when we surrender to the natural flow of time, when we let go of the need to control every outcome, we open ourselves up to new possibilities, new experiences, and a deeper sense of peace and acceptance. I learned this lesson in a really powerful way when I took an art history class at Harvard, no less. Yeah, I know, a little fancy, right? But hear me out. The professor, this amazing woman named Jennifer Roberts, had this really interesting assignment. She asked us to choose a painting or sculpture in a local museum and look at it for 3 hours straight. 3 hours, no phones, no distractions, just you and the artwork. At first I was like, seriously, 3 hours. I'd rather clean my bathroom. But I decided to give it a shot. And you know what? It was one of the most transformative experiences of my life. At first it was torture. I was fidgety, bored, impatient. My mind was racing a million miles a minute, thinking about all the other things I could be doing. But then something shifted. As I forced myself to slow down, to really look at the painting, to notice the details, the brush strokes, the play of light and shadow, I started to see things I'd never noticed before. The more time I spent with the artwork, the more it revealed itself to me. I started to appreciate the artist's skill, their intention, their unique vision, and as I sat there patiently observing, I realized that this lesson applied to so much more than just art. It was about learning to appreciate the beauty in the ordinary, to find joy in the process, and to let go of the need to rush through life. And you know what? That slow, patient observation, it actually made me more productive in the long run. Because when I came back to my work, I was more focused, more attentive, and more present. It was like I'd learned to see the world with fresh eyes, to appreciate the subtleties, the nuances, the things that I had previously been too busy to notice. So maybe, just maybe, the key to a more fulfilling life is to cultivate patience, to embrace the slow, messy process of growth and discovery, and to find joy in the journey, not just the destination. And speaking of journeys, let's talk about the myth of originality. We're always told to be original, to think outside the box, to blaze our own trail. But you know what? True originality is often the result of a long, arduous process of imitation, experimentation, and refinement. It's like that Finnish American photographer Arno Minkinen said, originality lies on the far side of unoriginality. He had this great parable about the Helsinki bus station, where each bus represents a different artistic direction. At first, you might jump on one bus thinking you've found your unique path, but then a few stops later, you realize you're just imitating someone else. So you jump off that bus and try another one and another one and another one. And it's only after you've gone through this process of exploration, of trying and failing, of learning from your mistakes, that you finally start to develop your own unique voice, your own distinctive style. It's like you have to go through the phase of unoriginality to get to the other side. And I think this applies to so much more than just art. It's about learning to embrace the process, to be okay with not having all the answers, and to trust that over time your own unique path will emerge. But yes, sometimes in our quest for a meaningful life, we can get a little too caught up in our own little worlds, can't we? We forget that we're just one tiny speck in the vast expanse of the universe. And honestly, sometimes it's good to be reminded of our cosmic insignificance. It can be a humbling, even liberating experience, you know? Because when we let go of the illusion that we're the center of the universe, we can start to appreciate the beauty and wonder of all that exists beyond our own limited perspective. It's like when we zoom out and see ourselves in the context of the grand scheme of things, our problems, our worries, our anxieties, they all start to seem a little less significant. This brings us to the concept of cosmic insignificance therapy, which is exactly what it sounds like, using the vastness of the universe to put our problems into perspective. I know it might sound a little weird, maybe even depressing to think about how small and insignificant we are. But trust me, it can actually be a really freeing experience. Because when we stop taking ourselves so seriously, we let go of the need to be special, to be important, to leave a lasting legacy, we can start to focus on what truly matters in the here and now. It's like we can finally relax and just enjoy the ride, knowing that ultimately our impact on the universe is probably going to be pretty minimal. But that doesn't mean our lives are meaningless, right? It just means we can stop putting so much pressure on ourselves to achieve some grand cosmic purpose. Instead, we can find meaning in the simple things. Connecting with loved ones, creating something beautiful, helping others, or just appreciating the beauty of a sunset. You know, sometimes the most meaningful lives are those that are lived quietly without fanfare, without the need for recognition or applause. It's like the true measure of a life well lived isn't about how much we achieve or how much we accumulate, but about how much love we give and receive, how much joy we experience, and how much good we do in the world. So maybe, just maybe, the key to a fulfilling life is to let go of the need to be extraordinary, to embrace our cosmic insignificance, and to find joy in the simple everyday moments that make up our precious 4,000 weeks. And speaking of letting go, Burkeman talks about this thing he calls the human disease, which is basically our tendency to struggle against the reality of our finite existence. We want to control everything to avoid pain and discomfort to live forever. But you know what? That's just not how life works. We're all going to die someday. We're all going to experience loss, heartbreak, and disappointment. And that's okay, because it's in those moments of vulnerability, in those experiences of pain and suffering, that we often discover our greatest strength, our deepest compassion, and our most profound connection to others. Like the more we try to avoid the dark side of life, the more it controls us. But when we face our fears, when we embrace our imperfections, we accept the reality of our finite existence, we actually become more free. And that's the paradox, isn't it? The more we surrender to our limitations, the more empowered we become. The more we let go of control, the more we actually gain control. So maybe, just maybe, the key to a fulfilling life is to make peace with the human disease, to accept that we're all flawed, imperfect beings, and to find beauty and meaning in the messiness of it all. And, this whole journey of embracing limitations, it's not about becoming passive or resigned. It's about becoming more intentional, more deliberate, more present. It's about choosing our battles, focusing our energy, and making the most of the time we have. It's about saying yes to the things that truly matter and no to the things that don't. It's about setting boundaries, prioritizing our well-being, and creating a life that feels authentic and aligned with our values. And you know what? It's not always easy. It takes courage, takes commitment, and it takes a willingness to challenge the status quo. But it's so worth it, because when we embrace our limitations, when we let go of the illusion of control, when we accept the reality of our finite existence, we open ourselves up to a whole new level of freedom, joy, and fulfillment. And that's what I want for you, dear listener. I want you to experience the peace of mind that comes from accepting what is the joy of being present in this moment, and the empowerment that comes from making conscious, intentional choices about how you spend your precious 4,000 weeks. So if you knew you only had 4,000 weeks, what would you do differently? What are you waiting for? What small act of courage or generosity could you take action on right now? This deep dive into 4,000 weeks is just the beginning. It's a call to action, an invitation to embark on your own journey of embracing limitations and living a more intentional, fulfilling life. And trust me, it's a journey worth taking. And all this talk about slowing down and embracing limitations, it reminds me of this other concept, strategic underachievement. Sounds kind of counterintuitive, right? Like, why would we want to underachieve? But here's the thing. When we set realistic expectations for ourselves, when we're not constantly striving for perfection, we actually create more space for joy, creativity, and connection. It's like when we're always pushing ourselves to the limit, we can get burnt out, stressed out, and honestly kind of miserable. But when we give ourselves permission to, not be perfect, to not have it all figured out, we can actually relax a bit and enjoy the process, and maybe even surprise ourselves with what we're able to accomplish. It's like when we let go of the need to control every outcome, we open ourselves up to new possibilities, to serendipitous encounters, to unexpected breakthroughs. And, I think this whole idea of strategic underachievement, it's not about being lazy or complacent. It's about being intentional about where we focus our energy, about choosing to excel in the areas that truly matter to us while letting go of the things that don't. It's about setting boundaries, saying no to things that drain us, and creating space for the things that bring us joy, purpose, and meaning. And honestly, I think it's a much more sustainable way to live, because when we're not constantly running on empty, when we're not always striving for more, we have more energy, more creativity, and more compassion to share with the world. And that's a pretty awesome thing when you think about it. And, this whole journey of embracing limitations, it's not just about changing our external habits. It's also about changing our internal dialogue. It's about cultivating a mindset of acceptance, of gratitude, and of self-compassion. It's about letting go of the negative self-talk, the constant comparisons, the fear of not being good enough. And it's about embracing our imperfections, our quirks, our unique gifts and talents. Because when we learn to love and accept ourselves just as we are, we create a foundation for a more fulfilling, joyful, and meaningful life. And you know what? I think this whole idea of embracing limitations, it's actually a really hopeful message because it reminds us that we don't have to have it all figured out, that we don't have to be perfect, that we can make mistakes, and that we can still live a life that's rich, meaningful, and full of love. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling like you're not doing enough, if you're feeling lost and uncertain about the future, just remember this. You're not alone. We're all in this together. We're all just trying to figure it out as we go. And maybe, just maybe, the key to a fulfilling life is to let go of the pressure to be perfect, to embrace our limitations, and to find joy in the simple, messy, beautiful journey of being human. And that's what I want for you, dear listener. I want you to experience the freedom that comes from letting go, the joy that comes from being present, and the love that comes from accepting yourself just as you are. So take a deep breath, let go of the need to control everything, and embrace the beautiful, messy, unpredictable journey of your 4,000 weeks. You got this. Until then, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and be kind to your precious 4,000 weeks. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Until then, drive safely and keep learning. I'll catch you on our next deep dive.